Hello to those of you out there giving this a listen. If you're joining us again, welcome. My name is Benjamin Jacinto, and I'm a freshman at DePaul University. And if this is your first time hearing my voice, welcome as well. I started this podcast in my senior year of high school, and now I'm giving an additional episode in college as part of a project for my word and rhetoric class. Though I'm now an alumni, I'd like to give a brief thanks and shout out to Moreau Catholic High School in Hayward, California, a school that offers top-notch education, a warm, welcoming community, and opportunities for success. Speaking of all three of these common goals, the two people on either side of me, Christina, a senior in the College of Communications, and Kody, a freshman in liberal studies, achieved these very well and are my good friends. So how are you guys doing today? And feel free to give an introduction on yourself and give a background with public speaking.
Hi, so as Ben mentioned, I am a senior at DePaul University studying communication and media studies. And I've got to say, I'm feeling pretty good.
Good to hear.
It's a Friday.
That's
true. You can't complain. So my background with public speaking, that actually started a long time ago. I began doing musical theater and acting as a young child because my sisters were interested in it, and of course, being the youngest, you follow what your older siblings do. And I continued through with musical theater and acting through high school. And actually, it was during high school that I realized I had a passion and a knack for public speaking as well. And I ended up studying communications, and I've been developing my public speaking skills not only in English, but also in German, which is my second language, which I am fluent in.
Oh, wow. That's pretty intense.
Yes, it is.
Learning two languages, because I know, it's usually easier when you're raised
yes.
as bilingual, but, like when you have to learn it. Like, I learned Spanish in high school, but I stopped.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Stopped.
I also tried learning Spanish in high school and grade school, but it did not go well. For some reason, German stuck. So I went with it.
Smart.
Wunderbar.
All right, Kody?
I'm Kody. What else am I supposed to say?
I don't know what grade you are, but
okay. I'm a
where
freshman at DePaul. I've been here for about less than a year. I'm a freshman. I'm so bad at this. Okay.
You in liberal studies?
Yes.
What kind of communications backgrounds do you have? What public speaking background do you have?
I've been acting since I was a very small child.
Oh, wow.
Both of my parents actually attended the theater school at DePaul a very long time ago.
Interesting.
And I've basically been following in their footsteps in a way because I got dragged into a talent show at my elementary school, and then I realized I really liked it, and then I just kept doing it. And then in high school, I joined the drama club, and then became the president, and then did some musical theater there, and it was really fun.
All right. Oh, wow. Well, speaking of interesting moments in life, do you guys have any really good or really embarrassing moments in, your public speaking career, whenever you're under the stage light?
I can't say that I've personally had anything too harrowingly embarrassing. I feel secondhand embarrassment for some people. Mm-hmm. So I will mention this one just because it's something that's like a nightmare of mine. And I've come close to having a situation like this, but luckily I was able to get out of it.
Nice.
But it's when you're up there giving a speech and you're slightly underprepared on one section, and you can tell that a person's underprepared on this section, and they're reading off their notes too closely, and all of a sudden they just stop. And you see the hands start shaking, and they flip through, and they go, But this poor girl in my one class, it was a 20-second long pause out of a 10-minute speech that couldn't go over. And she had to completely skip the section she was on because she couldn't remember it, and I just felt so bad for her because in a speech that I had given a week before that, I had missed a section as well. Just one bullet point. I got lucky I didn't miss a whole solvency section, but that is painful, and I felt her pain. And, it is embarrassing, even though you're in a classroom that, for the most part, in DePaul University, you're going to have classes that, facilitate a supportive environment and group. So we were all there to help support her, but we were all sitting with her on that point when she forgot. But good experiences is not only that everyone supported her through that, and, everyone was engaged, trying to help, showing that, it's okay, don't worry, we got your back. But I recently sat on a panel for newly admitted students, so the students who will be coming in as freshmen in 2020 fall. And I was there to answer questions and talk about the university. So that was it was a different type of public speaking event, and that one was really positive for me. So.
That's nice. You're influencing them to come here.
Yes,
And so that's a
advertising
big
the
responsibility. I mean,
it is.
You are the PR one of us. So.
Yes,
That's
true.
true. Yeah.
True.
But Kody, any interesting things with theater? I remember you mentioning that you punched someone.
Yeah, I accidentally punched someone in the face on stage.
Oh no.
And that was a part of a bigger dumpster fire that was a play. It was a play called She Kills Monsters. The play is amazing. I really like it. But the thing is, it was my freshman year. It was the first play I ever did. And nobody in the class wanted to do the play, so nobody knew their lines. The play was supposed to be an hour. It took 2.5 hours.
Oh.
Because people literally had to whisper lines from side stage.
Well, how did you handle the cleanup of the situation of punching someone in the face? How did you guys move past that?
It wasn't like a full pow like that. It was a slow motion, so it didn't hurt them a lot, but they were cool with it because they understood that we never practiced it. So
okay, good.
But yeah, that play, five of my family members were there, my parents were there, and my uncles were there, and I had to come up to them after the play and be like, I am so sorry you had to witness that.
No.
My uncle actually compared it to when he was going through chemotherapy. It was so bad.
Oh, that's...
Yeah.
Oh my.
Ooh.
Well...
Harsh critic.
Yeah. I mean, I agreed with him. It was horrible. But,
at least he's calling it out there like it is.
Yeah, they were glad that I was able to recognize how terrible it was, so we could all collectively. But as for good experiences, my senior year, we did a musical. It was the first musical that my high school had ever done since, it first was built. And I got to get up on stage in front of, 200 to 300 people and sing about weed and boners for 3.5 minutes.
What
it was
musical?
amazing.
13?
It was Fame the Musical.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, I played Joe.
Legendary. That's confidence.
Okay.
It was amazing.
I respect that.
They tried
That's a
to
strong
censor
role.
me. They're like, maybe we should do the
What?
PG version. I'm like, at the end, the main character overdoses on crack and dies, and
I
you're
find
trying
it
to.
interesting that a high school did this show.
Yeah, I'm really glad we did it because I thoroughly enjoyed it.
All right, what other questions do you have for us?
So, next, well, I know there have been some embarrassing moments, but other than the embarrassing, I'm sure anyone who's ever, spoken publicly will tell you that they can always feel, some sort of anxiety. So, in your guys' opinion, what is the most anxiety-inducing aspect of it? It's for me, when I was giving my TED Talk, one of the things that I was, most concerned about is that, there's this whole group of people who've given me this whole stage to talk. I'm going to be published on the internet under the TED name, and, Jesus Christ, sorry for using the Lord's name in vain, but I really hope I don't, screw anything up, because everyone put, so much effort into me, and it's just, kind of, painful to think about, none of these people had to do this, but then they did. And so, at that rate, I wasn't even caring if, I embarrassed myself on the stage. It was just, I needed to do these people justice, because, they're the real masterminds. I had part of it, too, and planning the walkouts and whatnot, and a whole bunch of backstory. But, they put so much into me, and so I'm I gotta do these people well. But that's definitely, the most anxiety-inducing thing for me. What about you guys?
Well, anxiety-inducing, I think it depends on the speech you're giving, what type, situational. But for me, majority-wise, I usually try to prepare as best as I can beforehand,
That's good.
Extemporaneous preparation and whatnot. But the actual most anxiety-inducing part for me is when you're first getting up to walk up to the front of the room, and you're about to start, and you're worried whether you're going to remember everything or not. And it's the first 30 seconds of the speech where that adrenaline is really just pushing through your veins. But after that, once you've got that good 30 seconds done, it goes smoothly after that. But I think for me, that is the most anxiety-inducing because you got the whole speech ahead of you for the most part.
Gotcha.
For me, it's kind of similar. It's actually doing it, actually saying the lines and doing the blocking. That's not the anxiety part. It's the part where you're waiting to go on. Like with the musical I was talking about earlier, when I got on stage, I was in the element, you know. It was doable. But when I was off stage before the show started, that's when I was like, you know, shaking and hyperventilating, and then that's when the anxiety really hit. And then you get on stage, and for me, it's just like,
it's also the best part because you get all this, you get hyped and you get all this energy and you feel it and you feel it and you feel it, and then you release it and you feel great. And I think that's why people get addicted to being in theater and being in front of people.
I think the only sad thing though is that, like, when you never make it up to the stage, like, you know, those Oscar moments or the Emmys are like they trip on the stairs.
Oh, yeah, those are the best though.
Like, then some of them have speech prepared too, but I remember seeing one clip and I forget who the winner was, but I think it was for the Emmys. She just went up there. She didn't even know she was gonna win. She really thought she didn't have a chance. So she walks up. She's like, yeah, this is pretty nice. And she's like, thank you. I gotta go now. And she walks off the stage. I swear, like, you could probably just find a whole bunch of these like little Oscar, Emmy, unprepared actors and actress bloopers.
Those are my favorites.
I forget who it is, but anyhow,
it's like, well,
that's
bye.
worse. Yeah, no. If there are steps, I'm like, okay, focus on the steps before I get up there.
Right.
But speaking on steps, to get such a TED Talk under my belt was definitely a challenge, and now my two homies are going to interview me on that.
All right, Ben. I will begin. I've got a few questions for you today, but I'd like to start just, you know, with a little bit of background on the TED Talk itself and the process of getting there. So how did you end up finding yourself on a TED Talk, giving an actual speech?
Well, I had always been a activist. Like, I consider myself to be an active Catholic. So, and it's not necessarily even like aligning myself with my beliefs. It's just that, like, you know, I have an ability to take action. I suppose, like, it's not mutually exclusive or anything with my faith. And so, like, it kind of just adds a little bit of reinforcement. But, in reality, after the Parkland shooting had happened at Marjory Stoneman Douglas, that kind of like shook all the high schools in the nation, and the whole concept of like, yeah, this is still a real thing after Sandy Hook and Columbine and a few others. And so it was me and a coalition that I had founded in my freshman year. This was the walkout I led. That was during my junior year. And the coalition, we kind of like, I was the head at the time just because all the original members had graduated except myself and then the dean. And we put together the whole band of like all these student activists from all these different groups, ethnic clubs, social identity clubs, etc. And then we reached out to the other schools in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we had some minor coordination on, you know, when are we walking out, what time, what are we doing. And so it really represented a united movement. And then after that, my social justice director walks up to me and he's like, hey, so I'm trying to secure a TED Talk conference here for the TEDx conferences. Would you want to be on board for helping us get this across? And then you would be a speaker. I'm like, yeah, sure. Little did I know that normally it's only seniors who would do it, and I was a junior at the time. Then also, at the end of planning everything, they're like, you know, we want you to be the opening speaker. You'll be the attention getter and the audience member. And I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting, but also highly concerning. But yeah, I spent a couple of months drafting up just that speech and everything, and most of it's rehearsed, but there are a few parts in there where I ad-libbed. And I was just like, did I really say that? Yeah, I did. And then I rolled with it. But, yeah, when I tried to find myself up there on that stage, it was mostly just channeling the emotions that I had felt on the day when I led the walkout, because when I gathered everyone in the grotto, I jumped up on a bench with a megaphone in my hand and started out a speech I had drafted up the night before at 4 a.m. And so it was really, I will admit that we were all flying by the seat of our pants, but I don't think it could have gone any better, and I don't think my TED Talk could have gone any better either.
So, was there anything you had to take into consideration when preparing for a presentation? Because I know like a TED Talk is different than a play. Or,
that's definitely true. So when it came to my TED Talk, and when it comes to any form of rhetoric in general or communications, I think the main thing you have to take into account is your audience. Just because, like, I'm walking on a double-edged blade in this situation, because not only am I going to be delivering it live to, the school director of the diocese that we're under, or some of the local city officials who decided to go, if everything went well, and luckily it did, my name would be posted onto YouTube under, the TED endorsement, and that's a pretty big thing to meet, and so there are quite a few requirements for that. And then also in general, when you give a speech, you really don't want to alienate any audience members, and that's a concerning thing that I think we can see best in politics nowadays, where people are solely working on party lines, and it's quite annoying actually that people just we need to reach out more to the other side, depending on which side you're on. And I know I may be taking a political turn on this just a smidge, but I'll steer it back. Is that we definitely have representation per se, but is it best representation possible? I'm not too sure. But I do know what's the best representation is when there's effective communication, and I just don't see that nowadays. And I know many of us don't. And it can be talking about one group of the government, one branch, president, vice president, Supreme Court, or local government, state government. For example, the city of Chicago right now, it's called the Windy City for a reason. And I definitely think that when it comes down to it, people need to consider who they're speaking to so they can ensure that, you don't offend someone with dog whistles or subliminal meanings. Because honestly, we're one of the most diverse places on the earth, and we got to take into account that there's a whole bunch of people here with different backgrounds.
So, moving away from that, what was the main goal for your TED Talk?
So I think the main goal for my TED Talk was to definitely, first off, rally awareness, the issues that, we have so many problems within our nation, within the world as a whole, that, we're going to have to unite together and tackle them one by one. And the key thing to getting a issue known is to make it aware to people. So I think my first goal with the talk was to draw the issue here, because I know we're in an interesting place in high school, because we're responsible and we're given responsibilities of an adult, yet sometimes we're treated like kids, and then we're also still under teaching and mentorship. So it's definitely that interesting gray area between your child life and then your adult life. And I think that was the second part of my goal, which was not only am I trying to make aware that, hey, we students have a serious issue with this, but I was hoping that me getting up there on that stage and executing such a speech would at least encourage and remind others that, hey, you've got a voice too, and it's just as strong, if not stronger, than other people. And it's important that you remember to use your voice, and not only use your voice, but take action. I know one of my final lines in my TED Talk was, rise to bear witness. And at the time, I had ad-libbed that, actually, just because towards the end of the presentation, I was just running on pure emotion. And it was definitely I didn't even remember what I said. And then I watched it, and I'm what does this mean? And I had spent, since up until a few weeks ago or so, and I watched it again in a class, trying to figure out what that meant. And it's okay, I kind of figured out what it meant. And it's I'm trying to rally my fellow students and peers and youth to stand up for themselves and what they want. And so I definitely think that they need to rise up and show that, hey, we don't want this anymore. And sure, we're younger, we don't have as much experience, but we're still going to be there, and we're going to be here when you, the elders, the older people in our lives, are gone. And we're hoping that you can do the right things that allow us to prosper, so we can pass it on to our descendants and so they can prosper. Enough of me and my TED Talk. Speaking of finding inspirations, how do you guys fit into the roles you have to play? Be that theater or a sales pitch or speaking to someone in German.
So,
intercultural communication, it's a real thing.
Yeah, so finding inspirations, what do you mean by this?
For example, with Kody and theater, do you do little things in your head that help you get into character? Do you have a process that allows you to get into character? Or same thing for you, being if you're...
Oh, I definitely do.
If you're doing a sales pitch or something somewhere, and you're all right,
done any of
hyping
those,
myself up.
Sales pitches and getting into a specific character are...
I mean, I think they're very similar.
They're
like,
similar,
They're
even if
similar,
you're in front of a
definitely,
courtroom as well, I think you have to
Yeah.
get
Oh,
a
yeah.
certain level of character as an attorney. But for me, honestly, I don't know if it's like consciously getting into character or just simply, you know, I don't know, method acting my way into it kind of thing. Because, you know, there's times where I start to overthink. I'm like, all right, I got this, I got that, I got that. And all of a sudden my brain's getting all crazy and anxiety. And, you know, I just have to sit there and silence it and simply be sometimes. But to get myself like inspired or motivated to get into that headspace, what I usually do is I usually say my speech in my head as I'm walking to class, or I listen to a recording of it before I go give one of these speeches. But inspiring myself, you know, to be in the right headspace, to be in the right, you know, position, to be that character. I'm either running the lines or running the speech over, you know, and imagining someone asking me questions and, you know, getting further into the topic and thinking through how I would answer that and, you know, cover my bases and make sure I know what I'm talking about. But for intercultural communications, I haven't given too many talks about this yet, but hopefully I will, as I am probably going into the study abroad sector of teaching and work, you know, German and American programs, you know, exchange students and whatnot. But German is a much more difficult headspace. A second language in general is much harder to get yourself in that right headspace for. Usually to do that, I do a little bit of an immersion, like a language immersion beforehand for about the hour beforehand. Like if I have a class at like 9 a.m., I'll wake up at 7 and I won't talk to my roommate. I'll let him know the night before that I am not going to be speaking English in the morning. So I'll usually start off with like an audio book, or I'll talk to myself in the mirror in German. Like whatever I'm thinking, if I catch myself thinking in English, I will say it out loud in German. Because it's a completely different sentence structure. You have to think differently. You know, the thoughts come out differently, you know. And a lot of the words that we think would have the same meaning really don't. So, you know, any language, honestly, a little bit of an immersion usually tends to help. And then running the speech over and only listening to German audiobooks or me giving the speech in German myself before I give it can help get me in the right headspace.
Gotcha.
You know,
so
immersion.
You're pulling out your German side. Like you're just...
Yeah,
you're working on opening up the floodgates.
Yes.
So that becomes your like predominant thing that you show and speak about.
Yeah. And you know, you have to, you know, there's some days where you feel like you're speaking your second language really well, and then there's some days where you can't speak it at all. But usually to get one of those good days, you got to start off strong. And even if you're struggling, if you keep pushing through it, like the barriers will break down, you know, especially in the United States, you know, being back from Europe. I spent a year in Europe. Being back, my German skills have gone way down because most people speak English. But if you sit there for a few hours and get yourself into the headspace, you know, really push through it and break down those walls, it starts coming.
And speaking of taking hours and hours, how does it feel to go and prep for a play and rehearsal for hours and hours, Kody?
Wow. Well, in my experience in high school, there was a big difference between drama class and the drama club because the club was an extracurricular, and then the drama class mostly consisted of seniors who were just, you know, getting the credit and then graduating. But it definitely depends a lot on who you're working with and like how you interact with them, because if you're able to build an environment in which everybody, you know, feels comfortable and, you know, engaged and actually wants to put in the work, then it can be a really fun experience and like time can just fly by. But if it's like an off day or people are like really, really tired or they don't want to be there, then an hour rehearsing with them can feel like 10 years. And so,
Jesus.
Yeah.
I understand.
So there's a lot of variability between casts, I'd say.
Interesting. Well, as second to last, final thing, talking about cast and whatnot, we brought this cast together here just because we're all in an archaeology class together. I'm grateful for them because I couldn't have made this podcast, which in and of itself, relevant to the assignment sheet, which is taking some other thing I did, which I chose to do an analysis on my TED Talk, and then giving it through different mediums. So I originally typed out a paper for it and everything, and then this is my remix, if you will. It's interesting because the irony of it is that we're talking about it, but then also the podcast itself is a form of rhetoric, And it's an interesting medium to do because it's just audio, which means you're cutting out any visuals. And the interesting thing about that is that statistically, we as humans pay more attention visually to various forms of body language and whatnot, and we're more likely to believe what body language says than what we hear. And so it's definitely interesting because I think you can even work on like losing some biases as you give something over the radio waves, simply because you're taking out the visual factors, you know. But in reality, if he's white, well, you know, that whole concept of visualization serving our own biases gets taken out simply because you have no visual in a podcast. So I definitely think it's interesting, as podcast is probably one of the most unbiased forms of rhetoric, of course, unless you're like biased as a podcast creator. But anyhow, when it comes to creating, I'm glad I created this friend group. And as a
that was the point of all of that, yeah.
It worked there. Effective communication. Anyhow, I think it's time to go now, but I'll see you next time on the airwaves. But until then, remember to stay safe out there, have fun, and communicate effectively.